for having me. Thanks for coming. It's the first time I've done this sort of thing, so I'm a tad bit nervous. So my name is Sharyl Jones. I work for Indellient, and at Indellient, my team is responsible for helping large, medium, small-size enterprises with their DevOps projects. So over the past couple of years, we've seen a lot of project success, and we've also seen some not so successful things happen. And I want to share with you tonight some of the things we've learned. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, excellent. So I've only got 15 minutes, so I'm really literally just scratching the surface. And I'm going to focus on 3 areas. So the first area, DevOps project success factors. So boiling it down to the 4 areas, and you've probably heard those 4 before, but we'll go over those. The second area I'm going to talk about is the importance of defining objectives and then measuring metrics that matter. And then finally, we'll get into some of the common DevOps project pitfalls that we've seen that you really want to avoid. And then maybe we can open it up after the talks and, you know, fill me in on what you've seen and we can learn together. Okay, so before we get into DevOps, I'm going to just step out of DevOps for a second and we'll just go over software project success. So I'm sure all of you in here have been involved in some sort of software project where really you follow a very distinct pattern, an agile process, a methodology, which starts with the definition, you go into planning, and then you go into execution. And at each phase you have defined roles, defined goals. So in definition, you're coming up with requirements. You have product owners or product managers working through requirements with clients or from the marketplace, those being refined by business analysts. So a really, really defined process, handing that off to a project manager or scrum masters to scope out the work, come up with timelines, and then passing it off to the development and testing teams to do their magic and to execute. All that iteration usually comes up with something successful. So you've either got a new product or you've got a new feature that you're going to deliver. And that is fairly easy to get success in that tiny little space on the left there on the development side. So why DevOps? So on the left, we've got development. So the process there, pretty well understood, just talked about that. And then on the right, we've got our production. And what we have in between is why we have DevOps, because we've got to get from the left to the right. And we want to do that in the most efficient and effective way possible so that we can deliver value to our clients. Nothing new here, right? So let's start on the left. On the left, an organization, your organization, may have many different types of applications, usually a heterogeneous mix of, say, in-house developed applications, legacy apps that you might be using in your business, and maybe even COTS apps that you're having to manage, and your clients might be using those. So that heterogeneous landscape makes it really hard to have a consistent way to automate and deliver those applications to the right, where we have the holy grail of production, because of course you want to get everything to production so that your products can be consumed. And again, on the right side, we've got another heterogeneous mix of infrastructure. So whether your organization's still working on-prem, or maybe you're all in the cloud, or maybe there's a hybrid. There's a lot of different factors to consider. So in the middle, we have the chasm, the software delivery gap, I'm going to call it. And in that big void, we've got a lot of tools. Everybody's like, yeah, I'm glad you're on the same page as I am. Sorry, I've lost my mouse here. Where's the mouse? Okay, anyway, we'll forget that. So we've got tools, and I'm sure some of you are familiar with these, some of you aren't. These tools really, a lot of these tools are unique. They're filling specific functions, really important functions. So from the left, we've got source control, like GitHub, and then we move to continuous integration tools like Jenkins, Concourse. And moving to the right, we get more and more on the ops side of things, artifact management, security, continuous delivery, metrics, you name it. So we're going from left to right, and we have a lot of tools. We have a lot of options. On top of tools, we've got your teams. So over on the left, you've got your development silos. On the right, you've got your operations silos. I'm calling them silos because usually they are not commingled in a true DevOps fashion. And they're operating, and each of these silos have their own objectives, their own goals, and their own processes. And there's very little common ground between the silos to get a straight path from left to right. And so you see that the process is usually really funky and not straightforward. So what we've seen working with a lot of clients is that struggle in all of these areas. So when I kind of introduced the 4 factors of DevOps success, we've got 3 here that organizations have to deal with. So you've got your tools, you've got your people, and you have your processes. Those are 3, but there's one thing missing. So you can have a successful DevOps project without the 4th, but really the 4th is crucial. And you take the people, processes, and technology. If you try to, well, DevOps is all about collaboration and teamwork. And if you have people working in different silos, using different tools and using different processes, it's really hard to achieve success. So we're going to introduce the 4th, which is culture. So what does culture mean? I'm going to just step out for a minute and just talk about the State of DevOps report. Are you guys familiar with that? So that's published by DORA, the DevOps Association for Research. I messed that up, but that report indicates that the key to a successful DevOps transformation is culture. Why is that the case? An organizational culture optimized for information flow, trust, innovation, and risk sharing. An organization that is putting those things first, this organization is going to have highly successful, highly performing teams. So that's what the research indicates. And in going along with this, high-performing teams need trust culture, psychological safety, meaningful work, and clarity. And this allows for calculated risk-taking, innovation, and being creative in our positions and to come up with the right solutions. So, keep looking for the mouse and it is nowhere to be found. Okay, so this is all great. So we have the 4 success factors for a DevOps project. So we've got the people, we've got technology, processes, and the culture. So those 4 things put together are great, but where do we start? I'm going to throw this up there. So start with why. Does anybody familiar with this book or Simon Sinek? A couple of people. Okay, so this book stems out of a TED Talk that Simon did, and it's the 4th most popular TED Talk of all time. And the name of the TED Talk is How Great Leaders Inspire Everyone to Take Action. So I encourage you to go watch it because it's really inspiring. He delves into why people are motivated to do things. And one of the taglines that really resonates with me and resonates in what we're doing with DevOps is people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So I'm just going to steal from that a bit. And I'm going to say in your DevOps project, it's really important to start with why. Why are you doing what you're doing? And what you want to make sure you're doing is you're aligning the project objectives with some business objectives. And why do we want to do that? Because we want to create that culture where everybody is on the team and we have a collaboration and teamwork environment where all of these great ideas and innovation can happen. And then we get to implement change, which we all know is difficult. Okay, so I'm going to turn over to you guys for a bit. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a couple questions. You're going to raise your hand. Okay, how many of you were involved in a DevOps project this year? Okay, so keep your hands up, keep your hands up. Okay, keep your hands up if you were aware of the project's objectives. Why were you doing what you were doing? Okay, most people. Now keep your hand up if you're aware of the metrics whereby your project was being measured success. So what was your success measure? Were you aware of how your project was being measured? Okay, a lot of hands went down on that last bit, and I thought they would, so that's why I was doing this. You can put your hands down now. So I just want you to think, like, what would you have done differently in that project had you known the measure by which you were being, the metric by which you were measuring success? Would you have done anything differently? Just something to ponder, because metrics take the guesswork out of success, right? And everybody wants to be successful. So if your team is fully aligned with your objectives and they know clearly why you're doing what you're doing, tying into some business value, then your team will remain focused and on track to deliver what they're delivering. Because DevOps is so complicated in terms of aligning people, processes, technology, and then getting that culture in place, this was really helpful, and we've seen this time and time again, that makes a difference. So I'm going to share with you 4 key metrics that differentiate between low, medium, and high performers. Again, this is in the State of DevOps report from this year, which incidentally is the largest report of its kind, 6 years running, over I think 30,000 participants. So really, really great read. It's very long, but it is a worthwhile read. So there are 4 key metrics that they identify. So top performing organizations, they measure lead time, deployment frequency, mean time to restore, and their change fail percentage. So I'm not going to go into what each of these mean. I'm sure we all have a somewhat of an understanding, but looking at this, you think, yeah, of course. But I would say less than half of the projects I've been involved in the last couple of years have my clients been aware of these metrics. Maybe they're aware of one, and they're not measuring it. So where to start, I would say make sure your pipelines are measuring these metrics so that you have benchmarks in place before you undergo any sort of change. Because if you don't know where you're starting, you have no idea when you're achieving success. And success is important because everybody wants to get there. Okay, so and how do we embark on these projects? I get that question a lot. I got that question last week at another meetup out in Oakville. Person came up to me afterwards and said, "Hey, I really want to get on this DevOps train. I know I'm supposed to be doing this, and I know my organization is small. I think there was 10 people, but we're not really serious about DevOps. Where should we start?" And again, I can't, nobody can answer that question for you. I just simply said, well, what are your business objectives this year? Is there a business objective that you can share with me, and then we can talk about it? So he talked about getting new features to market quicker. So again, there's that lead time metric. And where to start, so that's great. You have the metric. Where do you start? So this is a tool that we use with a lot of clients called an opportunity canvas. I didn't make this up. There's a reference there where you can go and grab this. This tool I find very effective for completing the first 2 tasks in your project. So that being definition and planning. And I'm not going to go over every single item on here, but I'm just going to explain to you the process. So what we would do on the onset of a project to do a kickoff, we would have all the stakeholders in a room, kind of like this, a lot of people. So you've got everybody from developers, ops people, testers, business stakeholders, whoever you need in the room that from A to B or end to end that you're going to need to have buy-in to complete your project. And then you go through each of the items listed in the opportunity canvas, and you define, okay, who are the stakeholders? What are our objectives? What are the metrics we're going to use? Where are we now? Where do we want to get to? Everybody sort of writes down their wish list of what they want to achieve as part of the project. And then from there, your implementation details really fall out quite easily. So you can determine your scope and your timelines as a team. You leave that, it's a 1-2 day sort of activity with a really clear picture of timelines, scope, and objectives and metrics. So that, I find this really helpful. Okay, so we covered the first 2 things that I was going to cover tonight. We covered the 4 DevOps success factors, and then we covered the importance of objectives and measuring with metrics. Now we're going to go into the pitfalls. This is kind of like the top 10 that I could come up with just off the top of my head. I think it took me 2 minutes because, you know, there are a lot of pitfalls. There are a lot of things that we've seen over the couple of years that lead to a not so desirable outcome, whether that be a money spent in no real value or whatnot. So these are in no particular order. This is complete brain dump. Number 1, embarking on a DevOps proof of concept with no clear path to production. This actually happens a lot. Usually it's led by, you know, ooh, there's a tool, there's a product vendor in that wants me to try their product, and yes, let's do this. And they're really excited, but it's usually limited to one team. And then very soon, as the project starts, they realize, well, wait a second, now I need to talk to security, now I need to talk to operations, and those people don't care what I'm doing over here because they weren't involved from the get-go, so it just literally dies. Number 2, treating DevOps as a one-time project, a big bang. So, hey, let's change everything all at once, like get from the left to the right, let's change everything in the middle. Again, that is not so successful, very overwhelming, and very difficult to achieve. Project scope goes bananas, and production, yeah, is a long ways away. Number 3, managing DevOps as a top-down effort. So whenever we have this top-down drive, it's been shown, and this is in the report, that this stifles grassroots problem solving and rapid iteration, because it's the people actually doing, living the day-to-day and doing the work that can come up with the best ways to solve their problems. So we want to be able to try different things, and if they don't work, if they don't get to your objective, or if your metrics aren't increasing the way you expect, then you can change really quickly. Number 4, failing to achieve agreement and consensus on objectives from all teams from the get-go. Again, this goes to culture. If you're not involving all the teams that will need to make your project successful from the beginning, then your success may not be attainable. Number 5, DevOps projects limited to one silo. Again, it's more talks to a failure of seeing the big picture and the end-to-end impact on every functional team. Number 6, diving into tools implementation without consideration for objectives. Again, the lure of a new shiny toy, I guess, for lack of a better word. Everybody likes to play with new technology, bringing things on board too quickly and not thinking about how to scale or how am I going to roll this to production. Number 7, failure to enable and onboard existing teams to new technology. This one is actually something new that we've discovered. We have a fairly large client that's really far down their DevOps journey, and now they're struggling with scaling because the teams that they have don't have the skill sets required to manage what they need to do in a coded enterprise. So for example, you've got ops people who may not be familiar with source control, and you have to kind of pull back and say, okay, we need to train our staff on this tool because they're going to need to use this on a daily basis and they've never used it before. So going through your entire end-to-end team to make sure that you have the right skill sets in place. Number 8, not benchmarking metrics before starting. And I think I mentioned this. It's very rare that a client will have done benchmarks. They'll just know that they want to get to production faster. And if you ask the question, well, what are you measuring today? What are your stats? And they just don't know. So that makes it extremely difficult to show that DevOps is providing value when you don't know where you started. Number 9, failure to prioritize and determine a minimum viable product. This one, what I'm meaning to say here is that, again, when you start your project, you have all of these stakeholders and they want different things, different objectives, but you really need to focus on the clearest and quickest path to production, the minimum viable product that you need to receive some return on your investment. And then number 10, not being realistic and trying to automate things that really can't be automated or don't need to be. So kind of stepping back again and really analyzing each product that you have. And that's it. Thanks for your time, everybody. I'll be around after if you have any questions. I think we're going to the next presenter now, though.
Great.
So you.
That was great.
Thanks.